sake, this is going to be great. So what we're going to do is we're going to build some resources in Azure. And this is because I've created some courses called Zero to Hero, right? And so what we want to do is target military spouses and get them ready for a job. We want to get them ready for jobs in IT and Azure cloud. And so that's kind of my goal. And I appreciate you helping me get there. So let's go ahead and take a look at some stuff first, because what we want to do is really kind of give some introduction ideas and then really do this in Azure so we can see that it works. And so I always cross my fingers because Microsoft and Azure is finicky, but when we do it, it's great. It's like watching the magic happen. So okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I want to share my screen real quick. I want to share the whiteboard. Let me see if I can do that real quick. And so I always talk about 3 things when we deploy anything in Azure. We have to do 3 things and we have to do them well, because if you don't do them, at least if you don't do the first one right, everything else kind of goes awry. And so that means things get screwed up and we have to fix things. So I always say we plan first, right? We plan our deployment and we make sure that we know what we're about to do before we do it. It always seems to work better that way, especially for those who are learning the Azure platform, because just like anything new, it's a little scary. It can be easily overwhelming. There's lots of buttons to push. There's lots of things to look at. And if you're not quite really sure where the drop downs are and what buttons you're supposed to be clicking, it's easy to do the wrong thing at the wrong time. And so, but the good thing here is that we're going to plan first. So we're going to deploy a basic virtual machine. It's a machine in a data center. We're going to install a role, which is the web services role, and we're going to actually edit the image and access it from the internet. So if anybody who's watching this, including you and me, you're going to create a machine that's going to be accessible from anywhere in the world. How does that sound?
That's a little intimidating, Keith.
Well, it's actually going to be a lot of fun because there's nothing that we can do there's everything that we can do to break it, but we're not going to break it today. But what we want to do is give you the experience of creating something real, even though you can't physically touch it. It is a real thing. So it's going to be a web server. We're going to deploy a web page and we're going to access that web page. So that's really cool.
Okay.
Okay.
And trust me, you can do this. I've got butterflies. Okay.
Okay, so this is how we typically deploy something in Azure. We have to create a resource group, and a resource group is like a bucket. Typically, we talk about it as a bucket. It could be a box. It's simply a container, and I don't typically like to use the word container because we identify a container as something else in IT. So it's simply a holding source for the things that we're going to create that's going to do one thing. It's like I said, our one thing today is simply to create a virtual machine with a web page.
Okay.
Everything that we do inside that resource group, we can manage. And so that makes management of the resources easier. So we're going to create a virtual network. So basically a space for the machines that we create, they're just going to sit in that network, because you live in a house, right?
Yeah.
That house has an address, right?
Right.
If you get mail, if I were to send you mail, I have to send it to that address, right?
Correct.
Okay, so what we have to do is we actually have to give things in Azure address space, okay? The address space looks a little differently than the addresses on our homes, but at the same time, it works the same way. So if we want to get to something, we have to have an address to get to. So it's going to give us an address, okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, and so I'm just going to create some ideas here. So I'm going to give us a text. And so this network will have an address space. And so I'm going to literally show you what it's going to look like, because when we get into Azure, this is what we will deploy, okay? Good? Okay, so it's going to give us a 10.0. No, let's do this one. It'll give us a 10.1.0.0 instance 24. And we could spend some time talking about what that actually means, but I won't do it today. So just know that that's going to be an address space, just like the area of where you live. They all have
Right.
similar addresses. This is going to be a grouping of things in that space.
Okay.
And then we're going to create a resource called a virtual machine. So you're on a computer, right?
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to basically create a computer, except it's going to be in cyberspace. It's going to be somewhere in the world, somewhere in a data center run by Azure, Microsoft employees, but we just get to use it for a short time. Sounds
Okay.
pretty cool, huh?
Yeah.
We're going to put an address in this space so that we can get to this machine. And so we're
Okay.
going to give it a, well, it's going to be given a 10.1.0.4. And again, we could talk more about this, but this is where it's going. This is kind of give us the 24 here is kind of really the group of machines. And
So like a
this, yeah, like a block. And the
block,
specific
on that block.
yeah. And the
Love it.
specific machine is 10.1.0.4.
Okay.
Okay, so with that in mind, I'm going to stop sharing, and this is where your butterflies are going to kick in, okay?
No pressure.
No pressure. So from now on, we're going to be looking at your screen, and we're going to be looking at your Azure portal, and I'm going to walk you through the steps of creating what we just talked about creating, okay? So we're going to do this nice and slow. And so all I needed for you to do right now is to share your screen with the portal in mind.
Yeah. So here we are.
Okay,
so I'm going to go back to the beginning.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. We're going to start at the beginning because what we did a little bit earlier was just kind of a test.
Yeah.
And so again, crossing fingers, this is how we're going to do it. And we're going to do it nice and slow.
Okay.
So what we want to do first is, because typically the word resource group icon isn't there automatically, we do want to go up to the text box and type in the words resource group.
So here's our
resource groups. And so the first thing that we're going to do is, is go over to the left where it says the plus sign and create. We're going to create ourselves a bucket, but we're going to create a new one. And so we're going to give this resource group a name, and we're going to call it, and everything that we do here can be done in lowercase. That makes typing really easy, so you don't have to, worry about the shift key or anything like that. Iis dash, or the minus sign, or whatever you want to call it, RG. So it's going to be an Iis RG. And what we know about Iis, it's identified as internet services, right? So basically web services.
Okay.
Okay. And we're going to keep everything in the East US. So everything that we create will be in that same region.
Okay.
Okay, cool. And again, the resource group is the bucket. So go down to the bottom button where it says review and create.
Okay.
And then once it gives us the validation test passed, we're going to create it. And it's a real simple deployment. It's just space.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Okay.
So congratulations. So now we're going to go up to the home page again, Microsoft Azure. And we're going to do a virtual network. So I don't see it there. So we're going to go back to the text box and type in virtual network.
Okay.
And then we're going to
And
click
we want
on
networks, not classic.
Yeah, it's virtual. No, nothing we do is classic, because everything we're going to do is in a resource group.
Okay.
So again, that virtual network is that space, that block that you talked about earlier, that we're going to put everything in, but we're just going to build one house. And so click create.
Ooh, did I get it? There we go. All right.
And it's in that subscription. Scroll down for the resource group that we just created, IISRG.
Okay.
And we're going to give this a name. So we're going to keep everything IIS so that we're consistent with our naming. So IIS dash and VNET.
Okay.
Go all the way down to where it says IP addresses and click on that button.
Okay.
Okay, this is that space that we talked about. We want to make sure that it's going in that right space. And you can see that it gives us an address spacing, that 10.1.0.0/16. we're going to use
Yeah.
a part of that space. So we're going to go down to the button that says default and click the
Mhm.
default. So
This
we're
one?
going to, we're going to click in the box, and you see where it says 10.1.0.0 right next to it, right
Yeah.
next to the word default. So that's exactly the address
Oh, okay.
spacing that I showed you that we're going to build.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. Nothing else needs to be done here. It's real basic deployment. So we're going to go down to review and create. It's going to run a validation test. Once it passes, we're going to create that space in
Okay.
Azure.
Creating it.
Now,
Whoa.
depending on how big the resource is, it may take some time. Typically, this is real basic because it's this logical space on a system. The virtual
Okay.
machine may take an actual minute. Just for, we want to take a look at it. So click on that Azure blue button that says go to resource down just below the resource. So it says go to resource. There you
Okay.
go.
Panicked a little.
All
Okay.
good. It's a new platform. So,
Yeah.
and everything that we do now, we're going to be looking at the left-hand side, that column, and we're just going to go to certain things under the settings place. So go to
Mhm.
the left, look for the word
Yep.
settings and point to it. Point to the word
Yep.
settings. There you go. So go just below it, address space. We're just
Okay.
confirming everything that we just built.
You want me to click on it?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay, so the address space is what we just created, the 10.1.0.0.16. We're not going to change anything. We just want to make sure that it's there.
Okay.
Go underneath address space to connected devices on the left. Just
Okay.
under connected devices. And it's not going to show anything because we've not created any devices just yet. But this is,
Okay.
but we will, when we actually create the virtual machine, this is where we'll find it. And I'll
Okay.
show you that when we do it. The last thing that we want to check is subnets. And so we did create one subnet, and that was the 10.1.0.0/24. So it's a smaller grouping of that bigger space.
Okay.
Cool. So far, so good.
So far, so good.
How do you feel?
I'm good.
Good.
I'm
No more
following
butterfly.
along.
No more
Yeah,
butterflies. Okay, cool. So we're going to create one more thing, one more resource, and we're actually going to create that virtual machine now. So go back
Okay.
to the home page. You'll click on the blue Microsoft Azure button right there.
Okay.
And this time the virtual machine icon is there. So we're going to click on that.
Okay. I'm going to create one.
Well, see if you can actually do a click on and see if that actual virtual machine page pops up. So I'd rather go to the page so you can see it, because
Yeah.
earlier we actually created one as a test, right?
Right.
And we can see it. Now that's in a different network, but we're going to put one in the network that we just created.
Okay.
So go ahead and click create.
Yep.
And the top one, which is the Azure virtual machine. And we want to configure it our way and not the Azure way.
Okay.
Same subscription, same resource group. So look for the Iis Resource Group.
Mhm.
And let's give it a name. And so we're going to just give it Iis-VM04. And the reason I'm giving it the 04 is because it's going to give us the 04 home space. So it's actually going to be an address of 10.1.0.4. So I'm just matching the name with the number, with its address. Okay, so we're keeping it in the east. We're not going to create any redundancy or any safeguards around that, but we do want to change some things here. So we want to change the image. We actually wanted to deploy a Windows Server 2016, which is at the bottom.
Okay.
And we want to find there we go. We want to make sure that it's the cheapest machine that we can get, and it is. It's like $100, but we're not keeping it up and running. So there's not a whole lot of stuff here, and you're still under the free account. So it's, well, we want to go back.
Yeah, I was just looking at that though.
Okay.
The same thing it did to us before. So, okay, it's populating in there, but it's unavailable for East for this subscription.
Okay.
So
Let's,
we change it. Oh,
Well, hold on. Let's do a couple things and let's see if there are any other options available for us. So hit the drop down on the image. We're not going to change the location because our resource group is in. And we're going to keep the same 2016 data center. Let's go back up to the image. So we'll just go back to the image.
Okay.
Windows Server 2016. All right, let's keep that there. Let's go down to size. Can we change the size?
See all sizes. That's what I went into before.
Okay.
And that's what was giving the hassle.
Let's see if we can create it for sake. And so let's see if we can do it. So go down to username and type in the word admin 01, all contiguous characters.
Okay.
And then a password that you can easily recognize.
Just gonna, you guys can all break in. I don't know if you can see that.
I can't.
Okay.
And we'll put it in password and confirm password. We're going to add a port down to the drop down. Right above where it says 3389, we're going to add port 80. So hit the drop down, HTTP port 80, because that's a web service. Let's hit the next button down the bottom where it says this. And we just want to change it to a hard disk drive. So scroll, drop down on the SSD up top and look at the bottom one, standard HDD. Then we're going to go down to networking.
Down here?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay, and we want to make sure that it's in the subnet 10.1.0.0. Right. And just for the sake of argument, see if hit the drop down, and because I know we might have two, but we don't. We have one, so that's good. So we're going to put everything in that same network. Scroll down, making sure that we're confirming the two ports open. All right, now we're going to cross fingers and see what happens. So we're going to review and create. And if validation test fails, we're going to go back and try to reconfigure the machine. Or we're going to go back to the other machine.
And utilize that one.
Use that one, right.
Okay. So yeah, the basics. I think that's where our. Okay. So what would you go back to home?
So go back to your virtual machine tab.
Okay. Discarding. All right. Here's our test.
Here's your test machine. So click on test one. That's your test machine. We're going to actually go to it because we know that's up and running.
Yeah. And so the difference was that we put this first one in central.
Okay.
Location in central versus east.
Okay. So right now, east is not accessible.
We're moving the neighborhood.
What we want to do is actually go into the machine, and this is where the magic happens. So typically when students create something for the first time and they actually can go in there and kind of play with it, this is really the special thing that kind of says, wow, I can actually do something. So on the top tab layer, there's the connect button. So right above where you are. Okay, hit the connect button, and you're going to download an RDP file, which is the first one. So that's remote desktop protocol. And that's going to allow us to actually have access to the desktop experience, just like we have now, but on a virtual machine somewhere in the world. So go ahead and download the file. And so wherever your download files are, you're just going to open up that file, because I can't see that at this point. But if you can see it, that's good.
I can see it.
Okay, if you can see it, then let's do something good. What's that?
We have an issue because it's my husband's. Use a different account. Username. My husband is a computer guy too, so
got it.
He has this.
Are you able to access the file? and open it. If you are, let me know. If we can't, we'll do something else.
We're going to have to do something else because I'm going to have to reset that password because I logged in.
All right.
Hey, dear one.
Okay. So that's how you create a virtual machine. We plan, we deploy, and then let's just see if I actually created one earlier.
Okay.
So let's see if we can actually get to the page that I created earlier.
Okay.
Open up a web browser, a web page, and then type in the numbers just as I give them to you. Okay.
Okay.
20.124.203.223.
Just like that.
Just like that. Okay. So
you say,
that's and that's the web. So it's a basic standard web page. It doesn't do anything fancy. There's no buttons to click. It's just a way of testing that we can access the services that we created. And this is what we created. We actually installed a server role. That server role was web services. Web services gives us lots of things to do, but again, this is just a test. I did add that this is me saying hello, so we can edit that page. And anybody who is watching this up until a certain point, because I'm going to take this page down within 24 hours, can type in that information. So 20.124.203.223. And so again, that is different though. That's a different number sequence than the 10.1.0.4 we had earlier. And so what people need to recognize, and that I can teach them, is that there's something called private addressing and then public addressing. And so private addressing are things that are internal to a company or a home or a business, and that people can't see. So people can't see that 10.1.0.4. But there are public addresses that are accessible to people on the internet, right? So when we go to web pages, or we go to do our bank, or we go to our email, or we go anywhere in the world for things, Amazon, whatever, we're accessing public IP address space. And so that 20.124.203.223 is a public address owned by Microsoft that Microsoft has given me to use for this tutorial. Perfect. So that's some of the uniqueness about, that's really a starting point. A lot of things that we could do with Azure. We could create infrastructure. We could create infrastructure for businesses. Instead of having businesses, maintain the machines, have IT people running the machines, you can kind of do that at a cheaper cost because the machines are somewhere else. We're just going to run services. But that's just the start. We could do machine learning. We could do web apps. We could do artificial intelligence, and really just kind of build beyond that. So my courses are designed to kind of build on the ideas of how networks actually work, how to create things that actually work on those networks, and how to create resources that businesses can actually use. But there's more. So wait, there's more. And there's more. And so one of the fun things that we get to do is learn scripting. And so I know when I talk about scripting or coding, people get even more afraid than you were earlier with all the butterflies, because that's beyond, they think that it's beyond their skill. If you can read a book, you could write a script. It's just learning a different language and typing it into a computer. So I want to share a couple of things that I wrote, and we're going to see it execute. Really basic stuff, right? But it gives the idea that we can do things with computers. And if you know how to do things with computers, you're going to get a job. Now, I have got issues with Microsoft and Azure because we weren't able to configure what we wanted to, but we have got time to play with that later on. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Okay.
and then show you what I have going on here. So let me find the share and let me find that. Okay, so right now, I'm going to extend this and you should be seeing the Windows PowerShell Ise, right? See all that?
Mhm.
Okay, and so PowerShell is a scripting environment. Iis is the integrated scripting environment. And this allows us to automate services or anything. Now, I'm not going to do anything fancy because that might blow people away, but I do want to do a couple of things.
Okay.
And so down here, I'm actually in the directory or the folder where all of my scripts are located. I've got quite a few of them. So I'm going to do a command called ls, which is list, right? And I've got a few things that we could take a look at. So I've got all of these scripts ready to run. Well, we're going to run a couple of them. So up here, you can see the one called date time, right? And all this is going to do, I'm going to run it down here. Before I even do that, I'll even clear my screen so it's easier to see. And I'll actually make it more visible. So I'll do it all the way up here. Okay. So we're going to run this date time, and all it is going to give us today's date. Okay. Now this other stuff that we see, new item, actually creates a file, right? So we could store today's date or any information that we call. We could actually write as part of that script to actually write it to a file for later access.
Okay, so let me ask you a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is a super simplified example, right?
This is a super simplified example of things that you could do in PowerShell.
Okay, so what would an everyday, what would be something that you might pull instead in terms of data?
Event information. Everything in business, everything that you do in the computer or on a network runs an event. So every time somebody logs in or has trouble logging in or does something, everything that we do is logged, and you could pull event logs. Okay. You may want to write a process that requires the computer to check on something or the network to check on something that's not already automated. And so you could write a script that pulls for that information. We could actually write a script if you need it to. At a certain point, we could actually make web pages pop open and close. We could actually have login information. PowerShell even gives us the option of having our computer talk to us. So if you remember, and I always go back to the 2001 A Space Odyssey, where Hal, the computer, he actually talks to the computer. We can make PowerShell talk to us. And so that's something really cool too. And so we could actually write, we're not going to do that today, but that's something else that we can do too. Absolutely. So there's lots of things that we could do here.
So this is just our super simple example.
Well, I'm going to run two super simple examples. And one is just going to pull the date, right? So we're going to do this. Date time. And we're just going to click enter. So I accessed the script by doing the dot and the backslash. That gives me a window that identifies all of my accessible files in the folder or directory that I called PowerShell, and that's actually from my C drive. Okay. So I can access a couple of them. We're going to access a couple of them. So right now we'll access date time. Okay. If I do it again, and let's say I've got add two numbers. For whatever reason, I created a real basic calculator, right? So it's asking me for my name. So I type in John, that's not my name. Enter my first number is 5, enter another number, 8. It actually can do that. So we could actually create calculators or any kind of accounting elements that we needed to operate. If I do an IP configuration and I get an error. So actually what's that looking for? And I'll check the error later. We want to run Well, I'll do this. So I've got some IP configuration, and this is the IP address of my machine. So it's private, you can't see it, and
Right.
it's all good. Okay. I guess that's really a lot of the simple stuff. So what do you think? Let me stop sharing.
Yeah, I don't think it's not. So I like to say, I'll date myself. I'm 40. When we were in school, we were learning the basics of doing coding, right? Very basic things. And it's evolved, but if you haven't been in it, it seems foreign. But once you get into it, and you realize that a lot of it is, it's not as difficult as you would think, right? It's just a matter of, like you said, learning that language and speaking that language with other machines, and other people, sharing that language. It's a little bit foreign, but then it gets a little less complicated over time, the more you use it. That's my interpretation.
I think what separates me from others is the planning part. You know, we've got to really talk about planning what you do. We plan our day, we plan our week, we plan our schedule, we plan our calendar.
Mhm.
Planning a deployment, it falls on the same line. So we want to make sure that we have, you know, if we're planning a lunch, you know, if we're planning a picnic out, you want to make sure you've got your food and you know where you're going and there's gas in the car and the kids are
Right.
ready to go and all that kind of cool stuff. You're planning that event. In the same way, when we actually deploy resources online, we're going to create that plan. So that's critical. That's a really critical component to, you know, being able to talk about what we do, understand what we do, understand what the pieces do, understand how the pieces connect to each other. And then we go ahead and do it. Now, there were some hiccups today, but
Yeah.
sometimes Azure is going to give us that. And so that's really a good way of troubleshooting. We're not going to do any troubleshooting right now because it's going to tell us what we need to do to fix the problem. And one of the things, so we may not be able to use East US for whatever reason, and that's an Azure thing more than our thing. And so we could easily go and create resource groups anywhere in the world. You know,
Right.
we could go to Central US, West US, different areas of the globe, all good. Now we want to stay local as much as we possibly can because that's where we can. Whoa, you just died on me. Are you still there? Katie, you went dark on me. Where are you at? So anyway, so because we're live, Katie's going to join us just a second. She's back. I love it when your machine does that to me.
Every time. Love the throttles.
So we're going to deploy, but then as you said, also is correct. You know, scripting, coding tends to intimidate people. But
Yeah.
once you know the language, and it's not, there are different languages, and so some are more very not readable by humans. And so PowerShell scripting builds from C#, which is another Microsoft product. And so it's very reader friendly. And so once you get the idea of how the words fit together and how the commands fit together, it tends to make sense. So it's a verb and a noun. So what does the noun requires an action? What's the action? There's the verb. And so what are you working on, or what's the object? And that's the noun. And so you can make things work really well.
Yeah. So in terms of preparing for the administrator certification, right? Tell me what your process is for someone like me who's a novice that comes into this.
Okay.
Like, what can you expect from the coursework that you offer, and how is that? Maybe I'll double down on that. How is that different from any other courses that are out there?
So what we're going to do is, my courses are designed in 4 phases. And so we're going to start with the basics. So even before we really get into Azure, we want to take a step back and talk about all of the vocabulary that we use. And so I really want people to be comfortable with what a network actually is and how it works, what IP addressing space is. So all the things that we did in terms of the planning part, we really need to be comfortable with what's the machine, what's a network, why are we putting things in groups, those kind of things, how do machines actually talk to each other? And so switching and routing. So the fundamentals, we get a good idea of that. Then we build upon that. We actually build networks. We only build a machine and it deployed a web page, but we want to build networks in Azure. We want those networks to talk to each other. We want those networks to be secure. So we talk about security, accessing security. So a lot of the security elements that we'll talk about are called defense in depth. And so there's layers of security, from securing the data that's on a machine to securing the actual network itself. And so those various layers are also important. The more we work through this and the more I work with participants, we actually become comfortable. So like you said earlier, I've got butterflies. And so perfectly natural at the start, but we continue the conversation. So we continue the conversation slowly. We quiz, what's a network? What's an IP address? What is defense in depth? What's, what's the service that we actually did today? Do you remember what that was? What was the service that we deployed? I mean, this is those butterflies. It was a web service, right?
Yeah.
We deployed a web service.
Yeah.
And why do we know that? We know that because of two things. One, you were able to access the page from the
internet.
Yeah, from the web, absolutely. And it had a public IP address, which is routable over the internet. So the more we talk, the more you learn to be comfortable with the vocabulary, the more that vocabulary becomes common nature, the more it makes sense. Okay.
Right.
We constantly
And
build
I
upon
relate that back to people as well. So
Exactly.
I'm working within an environment. I know the lingo. It's not foreign to me. I know how to work with teams using that lingo. I know how to speak to my employer in a way that translates that, kind of like we talk about civilianese, right? This is another way of like communicating in a way that someone else might not necessarily understand, or you being able to translate what they say back into what you need to do in your technical realm.
Right. And then after we progress through these 4 courses, and so from the basics to building networks, to securing networks, to scripting, we're actually going to take a look at case studies. And case studies are where businesses knocked on Microsoft's door and said, I need help, right? And so the Azure teams say, okay, well, what kind of help do you need? So we're going to take a look at how those businesses looked at different elements of Azure. So again, it's a big umbrella with lots of variants, lots of services, lots of supports. And I've mentioned a few, but there's lots. And so our conversation today is too short to go into all of those pieces. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give you, my students, my participants, business situations so that we learn to problem solve. And so that's kind of a cliche term, but it really is a critical element to getting that job. If you're told that you've got this situation and you know that a piece of technology can fit that situation, what we want to learn how to do is map that piece of technology to solve that problem. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to actually use pieces of technology to solve business problems and then present and demonstrate how that actually works. So if you're able to talk about a business situation, I can't deploy a web page, or I can't access this resource, I can't access this network. I want to make sure that I can get from here to there and nobody else can see me. Encryption, right? So we want to make sure that the transmission of data is secure. In our situation today, we actually used a public IP address and we were to gain access to that machine over the internet. There's better ways of doing that, especially if you're working from home, right? We want to access cloud resources securely. So we're not necessarily going to go straight in as an administrator. over the public internet. We want to make sure that we use a secure connection. Many people, probably you or your husband, know what a VPN is, a virtual private network, right? There's other ways of accessing that through Azure. Azure gives us the Bastion network, which is another network that we can deploy that gives us secure access to resources. There's ways of controlling data traffic inside a business enterprise. So that's really critical. And we want to focus on storage. So everything I've talked about so far really focuses on the infrastructure, but what do you do with the data? The most important element of any business is the things that it knows, the data, right? So how do we secure that? Well, we're going to create storage accounts. That's not necessarily in the curriculum that I have, but it's a component that I'm going to add, because without that, you're going to really not understand the value of everything that we do. So that's going to be a small piece of the puzzle that we build into it. That's really going to be adding value to each of my participants, because we want to know how to store data, how to access it, how to get to it, how to upload it, how to keep it safe, how to present it on the web. Lots of fun. Lots of fun.
And then hopefully, class sizes are on the relatively small size. It's not like you're doing 1,000 students all at once on a Saturday morning, right? This is the blessing here, is that it's going to be, hey, I know Dr. Keith, and building a relationship throughout this whole thing, right?
Right. There's some critical elements here. So anywhere from 10 to 15 participants per class, because two things are really important here. One, my interaction with you, the participant, on a very one-to-one, 1 to 15 level, knowing where you're at, knowing where you are, getting rid of those butterflies, because we did something really simple. We just deployed one machine. When we start building upon that, if we don't plan right, something doesn't go right. I want to be able to spend time with you in that classroom environment to kind of get you through that troubleshoot. It didn't work right. Let's find out, why didn't it work right? Do we need to rebuild it? Do we need to repair it? How do we move forward? It's getting rid of that fear. The first really obstacle of learning anything new, especially something that's completely foreign, is removing that fear, right? And we want to be able to remove that fear. I want to be able to talk with you. I want to be able to say, don't just do what I do. Let's talk about what we're doing. And so any larger than 15, that probably won't work. And so multiple classes of 15 would be good, but no more than 15 in a class. 12 to 15, like I said, is maximum, because there's lots of the detail. This is where it's critical. The term is the devil's in the details. The details are really critical here. If you click the wrong button, if you don't know what resource group to go to, if you don't know what the resource group is doing, lots of times just putting things in different locations, not being, observant of what we do, just in terms of geographic location, that's critical to a deployment. So having that. And the second thing, of course, is having students, having participants, having peers talk to each other. Some people learn differently. They learn faster. And so having that peer support, that peer motivation, what I call that learning community, is going to be really valuable, because that's really not just in the classroom, but in the world. We're going to build those networks, that community. It's going to become a learning community. It's going to become a peer community. Then it's going to become a professional community. And that's really critical. You help each other find jobs. You keep each other motivated. Coach each other, mentor each other.
There's no lack of positions. I mean, since we have been talking, I've been, looking in different areas and different regions and everything. And I think it is a really good fit. So now I've taken the time, I've looked at it, I'm going to enroll in your course. What does the time commitment look like? What does the scheduling look like for your program? How long does each course last? And then the duration. I mean, I can pick and choose courses, or how should I look at this?
I'm looking to start a course at the end of the month. And so I want to start with those who are fresh, who are passionate about wanting to go into IT, wanting to go into cloud administration. So I want to build from tier 1 and move all the way through to tier 4. And so tier 1 is 5 weeks, tier 2 is 5 weeks, tier 3 is 4, and tier 4 is 4 weeks. So a total of 18 weeks. That's going to move us along, building up those aptitudes, those confidence, and those skills, so that we can get to the next level. And I don't want to start at some people at 2 because they say, well, I know how to network. Well, I don't know that. And so
Right.
if I don't know that, I'm not comfortable with saying, okay, we're going to start at tier 2 with a certain group of people, because I want to know that you could really talk that language. You could tell me what a network does and why it does what it does. What's a layer 2 device? If I were to ask that simple question,
Mhm.
that can easily be an entry level question that a hiring manager asks you in an interview. Basically,
100%.
what's a layer 2 device? Well, that's a switch. You know, layer 2 devices. Well, I won't get into the details here, but you get the idea. So there's
Right.
things that I need to know to feel comfortable and that you need to be able to communicate. Because at the end of the day, our goal in 18 weeks is for you to be job ready. Now, I can't guarantee you get a job because I don't know how well you're going to interview, but the
There are
key,
resources,
the
but
key
you can't
is,
go from here to the resources for that. But the
right.
key is you have the skill set, you can speak to it.
And that's exactly right. You can speak to it because you're going to talk the language. We're going to solve problems. You're going to plan, deploy, and test. And you're
Right.
going to be able to demonstrate those things. And what's really cool about this is you could demonstrate it live. Meaning at an interview, all you got to do is have your subscription, log into portal.azure.com, log in, and show somebody what you can do. And then have them log in another computer, say, hey, I can deploy this. You're going to access this website, or you're going to access whatever, this web app, this website, this service. You're going to literally show somebody that you can do it live.
Right.
That's critical.
And so
That's awesome.
one of the things that I know, having talked to you and through my years of employment advocacy, the reason why this to me is so appealing is because you have a very unique way of making the soft skills and the hard skills come together that somebody who's studying just on their own might not get the finesse. It's kind of like when you're saying, hey, you need to learn the lingo. If I learn a word by reading it and I say it to someone else, I might say it incorrectly, right? If I have a concept and it's formulated and it's very like, I'm reading it this way, that's the way it was, but you can tell me if there's some nuance to it, right? It's the real world application of being with someone who knows how to do this, who knows the technical bits as well as the soft skills. So that part excites me. Okay, so nitty gritty on each class. So tier 1, what does my week look like in week
We're,
1 of
we're,
tier 1?
week 1, tier 1. So classes are Saturdays. And so each participant is going to have to give me an hour and a half time in group on a Saturday. So a Saturday morning, a Saturday afternoon, and that's going to be our one-to-one group class FaceTime. I'm going to give homework assignments, PDFs to kind of review, quiz questions to look at, things that kind of build upon the thing that we do in class that day, so that over a course of a week, as you have time, so if you're raising kids, or if you're working part-time, or even if you're working full-time, it's going to give you enough to kind of keep your mind thinking about what we're doing and prepare you for the demonstration that you're going to give me the following Saturday, plus the prep time to be ready to step into week 2, tier 1, week 2, and kind of build from what we've done. So homework, review, and the reason I want to give quiz questions with the answers is to kind of prep you for the certification process. So I'm not going to focus on this just being a certification course, because certifications are just a peer review. They let people know in the industry that you know certain things. Cool. I've heard stories of people knowing a lot of things, but when asked to do something, you know, they fall flat. You know, can you really? And this is even back when I taught at DeVry University on campus, and the way DeVry is great. I actually still teach there, but a lot of things that we learn online. So nobody ever really gets a chance to touch a computer, right? So what I did is brought in my switches, brought in my routers, and then had the school, you know, give us some equipment so that students could actually go in, physically connect two pieces of equipment, have those two pieces of equipment talk to each other. Now we could do it all virtually. And of course, we're going to be in the cloud, so it's all virtual. But the same idea applies. You want to be able to go in that day, hook something up, see it work, give yourself a pat on the back, smile, talk to your peers about what you just done. And then so it doesn't cost you anything, take it down and then build it back up again, because the repetition is where you're going to get the power. We learn by doing. We learn by doing it over and over. Now, the saying is practice makes you perfect. Well, it may, depends on who you are, but it's definitely going to make you better. And that's the key.
Yeah. I liken it to like going out on a bike ride, right? Sometimes you're going to go out and nothing's going to happen to your bike. And maybe one time your chain falls off, God forbid. And another time, maybe you blow a tube, but you have these tools, you learn how to do it more efficiently over time. It's just like baking. You might burn it one time and you learn what not to do the next time, right? Like it's experience-based.
Absolutely.
And you learn your best practices. So, hey Keith, do you have any reservations about women or military spouses in IT?
There are so many women, more than we possibly can count. Now, is there a disproportionate percentage? Absolutely. So when I was teaching the MSSA Skill Bridge for the past 4 years, I was actually kind of disappointed. You know, my classrooms were mostly full of men. Now, I had women in my classrooms, but the percentage might have been like 4 or 5 to 20, you know. So I'm not quite sure why that was, but that was a reality. Are men more competent in IT? I don't think so. Not even close. That can't even possibly be true. Because I saw it happen. I saw, you know, women step up and lead teams in my classroom.
Right.
Teams of men. So it's perfectly doable. It's perfectly okay. And in fact, it's awesome.
Right. I like to say, you're welcome here, right? Like, you're welcome here. Let me show you how to do X thing. Like, we need more of you here. You have a certain set of skills that you cannot understand as a military spouse. And I do have to comment on this. My husband has been interviewing for a number of positions because he's transitioning out of the military. And the first time he got excited about an interview and being on a team, the person who was interviewing him was a woman who was grilling him, you know, and like she knew all of the things. And he was like, finally, someone who is like as passionate about this and like wants to do these things. And that excites me because that shows me that there is, you know, there's space for women. There's more space for women. We need to make room for them. There's plenty of room for military spouses. This is something that can move with them. It's a great entry into IT and a great place to build on skills. And I can't imagine a mentor / educator that has a greater heart for it than you. So you have my, my seal of approval. I'm really excited to see you doing this and bringing this to our spouses. So
Absolutely.
thank you for being there and being an advocate for it too. I can't wait to see it grow.
So last thing, people need to connect with me.
Yeah, how can they sign up?
So the best way to start is through email or through LinkedIn. So this is a LinkedIn live event. This recorded will go on my YouTube channel, will also go on my Facebook channel, which will be we'll be doing some updates on. I'm going to create a community page to kind of build on the resources on Facebook. So that's a thing. But my email is mcnally.keith@yahoo.com or my LinkedIn page. Anywhere that you're going to find me on the web, whether it's LinkedIn or my YouTube or my website, is Dr. Keith McNally. So it's DrKeithMcNally.
Okay.
So can you do me one more favor?
Sure.
Go to drkeithmcnally.com. And I'm going to show you exactly what you would do to sign up for the course.
No.
So go to drkeithmcnally.com. Can you get there?
Hang on. I'm going to
Okay.
share this. All right, here we are.
So click on the Azure and IT courses.
I know, I'm like ahead of the game, thanks to my neurodivergent.
That's and that I was on a podcast. You don't have to play that right now. That's Chris Reddington. And we were talking about Azure Cloud and all the things that we can do. So that was really a cool opportunity for me. Click on so scroll down. And so we start with, all of the tier 1s, the tier 2s and tier 3s and tier 4s. And so each of those buy now green buttons are how you sign up and pay for the course.
Perfect. Wow, I love this. I'm super excited for you. This is so good.
And then there's more. So if you actually scroll down, me and a colleague, Jody Holton, we're the Hololens. So Microsoft actually has this augmented reality tool called the Hololens. Actually, the new version is HoloLens 2. And a buddy of mine, Jody Holton, we were kind of playing around and testing it. So that's kind of, it's a technology that's here and now.
Yeah.
And I would like to get more involved in that. So if you want, and I'll even, connect people to Jody as they sign up for the class, if they want to learn more about the HoloLens, because that's something that's near and dear to his heart. And as we kind of move forward, learning how to use augmented reality as a instructional tool and as an industrial tool is going to really, really expand our world. And so the learning experience plus the actual doing things with augmented reality, because it's just amazing. But watch that video and connect. And there he is. There's his handsome picture up in the corner, Jody Holton. And so go to his YouTube channel. He's got more HoloLens videos.
There's no lack of men without hair here. What's going on?
It's part of being well, I was a Marine, so I've definitely.
Exactly. You just get used to it. Yeah. And I see you have a contact form here too.
Yeah, if you just need to contact me directly, and that will go to my email.
All right.
That's absolutely fine. That will actually go to my mcnally.keith, but I actually
LinkedIn.
Perfectly fine. And LinkedIn is my best resource. I'm there daily. So connect with me, message me.
Yeah, and you've got your podcast stuff that you're building up too, which is excellent off of your LinkedIn.
So I would like to get into podcasting, and so to build on that, to kind of build my audience, I have a program called Level Up. And so every Wednesday night at 6:30 Eastern time, because we're here in Virginia, I do a level up. And so it's intended for a 30-minute conversation on all things leadership. And so if you're leadership in any industry, doesn't matter if it's education, IT, business, accounting, wherever your space is, even if you're a professional coach, I want to talk with you. And so I want to know what you're doing, and I want the world to know what you're doing. And so I want to give you the opportunity to talk. And so as I build my audience, this is going to be an opportunity for hopefully getting into podcasting, because I don't know if Chris Reddington is still doing Cloud with Chris, but I would definitely like to do Cloud with Keith at some point.
It's coming, putting it out into the universe. It's good. So yeah, I think this is going to be great, Keith, and I'm excited to see what this first round of students comes out with, and the feedback that they give you, and hopefully we can get more spouses, veterans, whomever into IT. So
Sounds good to me.
kudos. I'm proud of you.
Thank you. Can you stay on the call with me as I disconnect us from LinkedIn?
Absolutely.
Okay, so let me go. Thanks everybody on LinkedIn. Have a great day, and hopefully you'll sign up for my class. If not, just go ahead and connect, and I'll see you then.